Hello, everyone. Welcome to, I guess this is the third edition, what I've been calling Hanging with My Homies. And we've got Dan Runcie and Jenni uh, Daz- Dazols. I don't,
Dazols, yeah.
Dazols.
Dazols.
Dissolves. And today we're going to talk about SEO strategy for newbies like myself in the content game. So maybe just for a quick background, just have both of you guys introduce yourselves and I'll dive in after that. Go for it,
Okay,
Dan.
you want to go first? All right, I'll go first. My name's Dan Runcie. I'm the founder of Trapital. It's a small media company that focuses on hip hop business and strategy. I started it purely as a newsletter last year, was able to get good traction and following with folks that work in the industry, the music industry specifically, hip hop fans and the like. But I recently transitioned from solely being a newsletter to having Trapital as its own standalone site. And with that, I wanted to have more flexibility, but I also know that there's a lot that I need to catch up on about SEO and how to make sure that my site is positioned to be successful in the internet.
Awesome.
Hey, I'm Jenni, and I literally just hit publish on a site called modernfamilyfinance.com, and it's about helping families do financial planning and coaching, especially if they want to make a big life change. As I am myself, I'm leaving my day job in a corporate tech career after about 12 years or so. I'll be leaving in a few months. So it's kind of sharing what I've learned along the way. And anyway, this is all very new to me. I've spent the last 2 weeks like really deep diving into learning SEO and keyword research. So I feel like I've read a lot, but kind of just beginning the application.
Cool. Congrats on hitting publish.
It's a bit of a mess right now, but it's a work in progress.
Are you using WordPress?
Yes, I am.
Cool.
WordPress and Elementor. After having done my own film site before and realizing I needed a coder to do everything, I decided to use Elementor so I could have more flexibility.
Oh, cool. Dan's on.
Nice.
What's your theme, Dan?
Genesis.
Genesis. And I use Bridge, which is serviceable. It works fine for me. Cool. Well, I will jump in. You guys know me, Kay from Rad Reads, and I just love sharing all these little pearls. To call them wisdom makes it sound too fancy. But I think for me with SEO it was something I never thought of. So I started my blog in January of 2016 in earnest. My newsletter was a year prior, and I never thought about SEO because it was just kind of this, I was an artist, right? I just created nice things and people would find them. I also had a very incorrect view about how content on the internet works, which was that the best content rises to the top. That could not be more inaccurate. You saw that kind of with like The Ringer, for example, that has amazing content, but needed the distribution from Vox to really kind of get to the next level and make it worth their while economically. And so I never thought about SEO. My site was on Medium, then it went to WordPress, and then I had this kind of midlife crisis where I didn't like my domain, so I changed my domain briefly from radreads.co to rad.family, which was a horrible domain name. And then I switched back, and then, but I had, along the way, there was something that I knew that was very valuable, is that I had two big media pieces about me and Rad Reads, CNN and Bloomberg, and those sites had linked to Rad Reads. And I needed to preserve the value of those links because, as we'll talk about, those are high value sites linking. When a high value site links to your tiny little site, it makes your site worth a little bit more in the eyes of search engines. And so I wrote frequently and never thought about SEO. Probably my biggest acquisition strategy was my newsletter, but my newsletter didn't grow that quickly. It was kind of slow and steady. And I did social, but I don't love Twitter that much. I mean, I post on it, but I'm not particularly good at it. And so I that was how it was growing, which I wasn't really growing. And then it kind of, I don't know exactly what tipped the scales, but a confluence of events. I think someone was like, you got to look at, you need to, if you're not acquiring, if the only way you're acquiring users is through people forwarding your newsletter or people just randomly typing in Rad Reads, like you are not going to grow. And so that kind of led me towards SEO. And as I just became more conversant in it all, I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna try to figure this thing out. And I had some great teachers like Nat Eliason. Another guy in that cabal is Taylor Pearson, and they all kind of really helped me. So I probably maybe like a year ago or 18 months ago, I just looked. So now about 25% of my traffic comes through search, and it's really 5 posts, and I post weekly. So in a year, I've posted 50 plus posts, So I started thinking about SEO in a few ways. The first was, how do I, will it affect what I write about, right? And that's kind of the obvious thing on search is you can write like an artist, or where you just write the thing that excites you, or you can write the thing that people will be typing into search engines. And so what I started to do was to try to understand if there was an intersection between what I wanted to write and what people were searching for. And that was probably the first step in my process of like thinking about how I wanted to approach SEO. But actually, I realized I got to zoom out first. How do people find a site? Like Dan's site is about hip hop, and Jenni's site is about finance and family and parenting. So people will type in keywords, right? They might type in Drake. But if you type in Drake, you're probably going to get like Drake's Wikipedia page. You'll probably get Drake's website, his Instagram. You're not going to get to the top. You really want to get to that front page, or the first couple pages. And you're not going to do it if you're competing against Wikipedia and so on. And the reason why is that basically the way Google works, and no one knows exactly how Google's algorithm works, but Google in the old days, they would rank pages. So the New York Times might be, let's say 100 scale. New York Times might be 100. Rad Reads is 39. And so if a site that has 100 links to a 39, it might boost it up to 40. And this was called accumulating backlinks. And that was really the original Google algorithm. But Google's gotten way, way smarter now. And it knows so much about how we spend our time. So Google can now look at how long you spend on a page. They could look at, like, if you scroll, they can look at where you click. They can look at all of these things. And so basically Google has started to mash up this like, how many people link to you? And once people are on your page, like, do they like it? Do they find it useful? Do they spend time on it? Do they scroll? And so those are like the levers that one could use to get on the front page of Google. Then what you want to do is obviously think about, well, are keywords competitive? And so keywords is what people search. And again, if you think about where the money flows, if you were to search like personal finance is a very valuable keyword because Schwab and everyone and their mother is competing for that. So that might be a difficult angle to get into the conversation if you have a low rank site in a competitive keyword. So those are like the parameters. It's like, what's the ranking of your site? And when I started, my site was like in the 30s. And since it's moved up 9 spots in about a year. And just to give you some like New York Times would be 100 or 99 out of 100. Maybe like Ramit Sethi, I Will Teach You to Be Rich is like 75. Tiago Forte, who's probably more prolific than me, is in the mid 40s. And so that's kind of like the arc. That's the structure of the pages. And so the approach that I took was, I know that I have a low ranked site. I'm going to find keywords that are not that competitive, and we can talk about like how to identify that. And then once I find those keywords, I'm going to look at the results and see if there are people on the front page that are ranked lower than K. And if there are, then I'm going to try to write something that will try to attack that page. And then once I write the piece, then I will try to make the piece as friendly to Google, so that Google thinks that it's like a great piece of content, meaning it might be like roughly 1,500 words. There's going to be images, there's going to be sections and things like that. So that's kind of, I know it's a little bit of a theoretical discussion that I just laid out with. But again, if I sum it down, like I know that my site ranks low. I look for keywords that are related to what I want to write about, but that aren't like personal finance. So instead it might be something a little bit more complex, like should you rent or buy, right? It's a longer phrase that people are less likely to search than personal finance, but there still might be some action there. And then I'm going to look to see if people are ranked lower than me. And then I'm going to say, okay, this is a piece that I want to write. This is a piece that I want to write. And this is a piece that I have a shot at writing. And I am going to write that piece and then optimize the content accordingly. So that was a lot to process. I might just pause there and see if you guys have any reaction to that or questions and y'all should know Jenni has been deep diving on this. So she probably actually knows a lot more about the specifics than I do at this point.
Was that a tough shift for you to, as you kind of said it before, you were the artist that was writing specifically about what you wanted to, and now you're doing it more strategically based on Google. So it makes sense, but like, how did that feel as like, from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I approach it in a couple ways. The first is I need to stay an artist. So I will, like, it's almost like depends on my mood, but sometimes I just want to write because there's something I want to say. And maybe I'll just look at the keywords. I'll do a quick keyword search to see if there's a shot. So for example, I wanted to write about the relationship between time and money, but I didn't want to think about the SEO. I just wanted to write the piece. And so I kind of did a few searches like time, money, relationship to time. And there was this quote, time is money, like the quote itself. And that had a like decent volume, but no one had really written about it. So I named the piece time is money in quotes, comma, nope. So I'll do like little hacks like that. I don't think that worked. It might have picked up a little traffic here and there. I actually haven't checked, but that's so when I want to be an artist, which I'd say 75% of the time I want to be an artist. And then 25%, so like 1 out of every 4 pieces, I'm going to specifically do an SEO hit. And so I'm going to do the research. I'm going to structure the piece accordingly. It's still got to be about something that I want to write. So I wrote like a guide to Notion, right? That was an SEO oriented piece where I was very strategic about the keywords. I knew I had a shot, and then I organized the piece. The thing is that the problem with doing SEO pieces is that you probably spend as much time writing the piece optimizing it. So all these mundane things matters. And this is called on-page SEO, on-page optimization, which is you have to have your keywords in the header. So if you're writing like about Notion, you know, every header needs to have Notion is the best, Notion for productivity. You have to like put that's how hard it is. You have to put Notion and productivity in the same sentence in the header. And you can't offend your reader because like they have to want to keep reading. And so what I found with the SEO pieces was that it would take about, let's say it took like 3 hours to write the piece. It would probably take 2 hours to do all the optimization. So there's things like a few of the optimizations that are annoying is you should have a bunch of images because Google cares about the visual. And again, think about it as a reader, right? Do you want to read something that's 2,000 words with no images, or do you want to read something with 2,000 words with images, right? And the images need to break up the text. The headers need to break up the text. Then there's stuff like you could do that gets a little crazy is, you could look for synonyms of productivity, like optimization and And there are tools that will spit out all these words and then sprinkle those words in. Your image file names need to have your keywords in it. You need alternative text for people who can't, who are blind, to describe what the image, all that stuff. It's like, ideally you put a video, because if you have a video on the page, like people might watch the video in line and they'll stay on your site longer. So you'll maximize time on page. There's a tense to use, like, I forget, like active tense versus passive tense. So all that stuff starts to really add up, and you're easily going to double the amount of time. And so then it's like kind of the overarching question is like, is it even worth it? Right. You know, cause that's just to get to the top. But then if you get to the front page, and that's hard, then people need to click, then they need to read, but then you still need to convert them, right? Then, like, you need to get them to sign up. And to be honest, my SEO is just like, how often, I think I have 5 pages that have searches of over a couple thousand where I'm in the front page. And I know how many clicks it drives, like about a third or 25% of my traffic. I have no idea if it converts into email newsletters. And I definitely have no idea if it converts into purchases, because I've only sold one thing. So that's how I balance it. But I also have been able to, I have a little bit more of a knack of what has a chance of being a good SEO piece. So for example, in my world, book reports are a really easy one. If you write a good book summary, you know, you can find the book based on how popular it is. Like, you can always use the book as the lever of popularity, right? Like, you know, you have the Drake book, and you might have, you know, like some SoundCloud rapper book that, you know, a subset of people have heard of. But again, the question then becomes like, if I'm writing book summaries, like, what, if someone finds that book, am I going to rope them into my community just because they were interested in that book? Like, that's a difficult question to answer. And if you're going to do all that work, you probably should have some reasonable answer as to if that's actually worth it.
Right. That makes sense. I guess relatedly, when we send out email newsletters, or at least when I send out mine, you often have that view email in browser or view it in browser. And if someone clicks that obviously is additional traffic to then bring onto the site. But now, like, this conversation is making me think that when you have the email and text, although a lot of readers prefer to just have it while you can read it there, having the link without having the option to just read within the email itself takes traffic away from the website. So I don't know if that's something you've ever thought about, or if that is a thing that people consider.
That's a good question. I mean, Google's smart enough to know that, you know, if someone came from an email and is reading the page, like they probably know that that's not, like, there's like lower value to that click. I don't know this for a fact. But I think there's a overarching point that I think you want to be careful on, that we all need to be careful on, is that if you ruin your reader experience, they're going to get pissed off as well. So, you know, like in my newsletter, I'll show the first couple paragraphs and I kind of write it in a way that like entices you to click, you know, like I last one, like I ended it on like a fart joke, and I'm like, who's not going to want to click? But at the same time, I can't put a 2,000 word. I have so many other things in my newsletter that I can't put a 2,000 word essay in my newsletter, because it would just take away from all the other things that I'm trying to share. So I would say that, yes, you want to drive traffic to your site, but again, it's the quality of the traffic. And again, Google will know that Google knows that a click through your newsletter and a click through a web search are totally different. And so they're going to adjust how they, you know, rank that internally.
Got it.
And like, so you mentioned you have like about 5 posts that really, really work, that bring the biggest chunk of your traffic. And I guess my question would be, so you've obviously written more than 5 posts that are optimized for SEO. Mm-hmm. What is your best guess as to, of all the things that you're doing, like what's actually working? Because you're right, like it could take forever to do all the things that all the, you know, SEO masters are telling you to do.
Yeah. It's a really good question. and you're actually prompting me to think is I actually, what I should do, and this is very possible to do, it's just another thing to do, is really track conversions, right? So what I really should do is, and I probably could reverse engineer this all and say, so I think that the post that drives the most traffic for me is I wrote a book report, a book summary of Atomic Habits. And that drives like 100, like 50 to 100 clicks a day. And so in that case, like I wanted to write that piece. I used that piece in my client work as well. It was actually it was kind of like more of an artist piece. But to really answer that question, I should know, and I know anecdotally, because I've seen the tags, that it drives a decent amount of clicks to my newsletter. Then the question is like, do they stay? Do they click? So it's just so much work, right? And then just to like think about that funnel, right? It's like they searched, they found it, they signed up to the newsletter, they clicked. Did they read the newsletter? Did they then buy my online course? And I just, so like just to track all that for like 20 subscriptions a month, I think it like raises the top 1,000, the 10,000 question is like, what is a subscriber actually worth to me economically, right? Which is actually, if you step outside of SEO and newsletters and all that, that's actually, I think that's a question that I've been thinking more and more about. That's actually, and I wrote this to you in the email, is like 90% of my revenue is coaching and speaking. And it's like very high price point, limited by the number of hours. And honestly, if I never did SEO, I would still have all those clients. Mm-hmm. Right. So you could make the intellectual argument that it's actually not worth my time at all to do that. And if anything, I should do things that either raise the price of those hours, or if I'm not at capacity, or make that offering better, that would again raise the price. So I think that's like the real question. Like, what is a subscriber worth? Right? You want to have like 50 subscribers that will pay you $1,000 a month, or do you want to have 50,000 that will pay you $2 a month, right? And so I think that, and this is where the internet kind of fucks with you, because there's so much vanity metrics built into all this, right? But in my grizzled 4 years of entrepreneurship, I'm really realizing that the numbers don't mean anything. I mean, if you're trying to make money, they still don't mean anything unless you can tie the money that you make to the direct subscriber, right? And I think that's and I think, Dan, you're in a more consumer facing, kind of higher volume, lower price point world. So it's probably going to matter more for you. Jenni, I'm not exactly sure like the business model that you're approaching, but you're probably like having a gigantic amount of followers might not actually change your bottom line. So I guess to answer your question is like, I don't think I've actually kind of dialed it down a little bit. Like unless there's a key opportunity, like with Notion, I see a key opportunity because I think I'll do a product on Notion. It's early days on the product, so there's just not less competition on it. And it feels like it's kind of having that inflection point. And as the artist, like I love writing about it. So it's kind of like, I look for that alignment across those like 4 dimensions and reusability. Like, can I use it in my coaching practice? But to do things like SEO alone, like I wouldn't do that. And I think unless you really know what you're selling, I don't think it's particularly worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like just my own 2 cents from my little bit of reading is like, because as someone who's starting out, right, like there's so many different directions. Like right now I still have a day job. So I have 10, maybe 15 hours a week to devote to this thing. So I have very limited time. And it's like, is my time worth better spent trying to figure SEO, or trying to write awesome content, or trying to figure out how to market that content? Like, what do I do? And I don't know, my conclusion, I don't know what's right or wrong, is like, at least when it relates to SEO, I just see it as a way with the keyword research to figure out what my audience wants and then like to understand them better. I see it more like that as a market research tool versus like I'm trying to game Google, because like you say, like what's the point if those people aren't actually who you want anyways, even if you have, 100,000 people visiting a month.
But I would say, so market research, it feels, so you're in the realm of personal finance, right?
Yeah.
The combinations of you might say, should I buy a home? How much should I spend on an engagement ring? How will I pay for health insurance if my spouse quits? Those types of questions. My hunch, and again, this is a very kind of just off the cuff remark, but my hunch is that there are probably way more effective, more direct ways of market research to answer like for example, you could think about the cohort of your group, of your target customer.
Yeah.
You could probably even buy that customer somehow, like that list, or you could find it through like alumni networks or things like that. Or even social might actually be more, because you could actually have the conversation, because I think that there's something like the data that you're going to get is like, how much should I spend on an engagement? It's going to say that, 20,000 people ask this question a month, and maybe it'll tell you like what country they're in.
Right.
And I don't, then it's up to you to determine, like, is that going to advance my market research?
Yeah. That's a good point.
Question about content that has done well that you didn't necessarily think was going to, but then you optimizing for SEO later. Like I've seen that come up as a topic a few times. Have either of you like looked into this or have thoughts on it?
So I've looked into it briefly, and I don't have enough data points, but I could share two kind of stories that have influenced my thinking. Okay. One is that I had a friend who went back, who did keyword research and went back in and kind of tweaked the headers and so on to kind of make it more, to do more kind of on-page optimization. And he saw small traffic boosts doing it. Another person told me that's like, it's just not worth it, because a few things. One, if you try to do it, it's actually really hard. If you've written something and then you go in and take all the synonyms of productivity and replace them with another word like efficiency, like writing doesn't work that way. You can't just like Control H productivity with efficiency and your copy still works. And so I think that, what I have heard is that a piece that like you can tweak pieces that are working to keep them fresh. So for example, like a lot of my Notion pieces, if Notion has a new release, I'll probably have to go in and update the post so that it doesn't decay, because Google is smart enough to intuit if your piece is stale, not just by the date you wrote it, but by like what everyone else is saying about Notion and kind of cross-matching it to what you said. And so like, for example, one of my pieces that was successful is I did like 17, a lot of my SEO has actually been accidental. So I did 17 Chrome extensions to like make you more productive. And I guess people actually search like a number with Chrome extensions, which is like, so Chrome, it was like Chrome extensions, apps and services, but the kind of the arbitrage keyword was Chrome extensions that like was way less competitive. So I was showing up in these searches a lot, but I kind of stopped updating that page because I just like the artist thing, like I just didn't care about it, and it's like decayed and it's dropped out. So, and it's like 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. So if I wanted to, I could probably bring it back up. But again, it's like that. And to Jenni's point, like that specific reader is not converting super well into what I want like conceptually.
Right.
That it's just like I got a million other things to do. The other thing, I don't know if you, Dan, have realized this having written, but I've written. There's a lot of times I write the same story 4 or 5 times in 4 or 5 years, right? Like I started and it's kind of really rough, and I get like my idea becomes better, so I'll rewrite it again. And then, those old ones, they never had any SEO value anyway. But like the 5th one, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to make a go for SEO on this one. And Jenni, to your point, I've written 50 pieces in the past year, probably 10 are SEO, 10 were like 10 or 15 were SEO, kind of like I really invested the extra time, and probably a third of those, like five of them like show up on the front page of a 5,000-ish search. But again, I don't even know the conversion data. So like, what's the fucking point?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And I think the reason I ask is I have a piece that has performed pretty well. It's my most popular piece. I wrote it in January. So if you were to type in Jay-Z and Damon Dash, 2 former business partners, it's, either number 2 or number 1 or number 3, depending on like what word you're using, even ahead of Wikipedia in some searches. So I'm like, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah. So I'm even thinking about little things, whether it is, a plug at the end to the fact that I've now launched a membership or something else. Like I know those are obvious things, but if there's any other things versus not even messing with that because I don't want that to throw off, like I guess those are the details that I'm not sure about.
Yeah, I think that for that specifically, I would just keep watching it, like, and if it starts to drop, I mean, I really, I would say, think about the reader. If there's ways to make it better for the reader, do it. Okay. And that could be like adding a paragraph. That could be like if there's a new piece of information. But I wouldn't go crazy on the on-page SEO stuff. Like, there's one rule that's like, you should have 5 links for every 1,000 words, I think. If you have 3, like, I don't think it's worth it, because you already did it, right? You're already there. Right. But I think I would watch out for the decay as it starts to slip. The other thing too, that you could play around with it, so that post is starting to build up some equity too. Like, and that's the cool thing about SEO is that, more people will link to it. The longer it stays on top, more people will link to it, which will reinforce its position on the top. So like that, you want to kind of make sure that flywheel is going. The other thing that with that piece specifically, what I would try to do is try to boost the equity to that piece. So for example, if there are people that that write about that topic, you might try to entice them to link to it somehow, right? That will kind of continue to cement that piece, which will also just give Trapital.co overall better link value, right? Right. And so another approach that we actually haven't talked about, I haven't done much of this, but, and Jenni, you probably read more about this than I did, is guest posting. So if you guest post on a site with high rank, they usually will let you link to 1 or 2 of your posts. Again, it's got to work with the context of the article. But if for some reason you could get on a site, I don't know, like Pigeons and Planes or something, which probably is like a 60 or a 70, if I had to guess, ranking. And you could, I don't even know if they take guest posts, but you could write a guest post that's adjacent to that piece, and then link to that piece. That's going to do wonders to your site. So that could be an angle. And again, and then you can play with the conversions, like move your sign up box in different places. I know you use Thrive Leads, so you probably can get some better data, like what's working on your conversion. So that might be the thing that I play with. And then adding video, right? I mean, maybe there's you could, in that case, I don't know if you have a YouTube channel, which is its own thing, but you could kind of start, like, it's almost like using that piece as a kind of a anchor to other things
Right.
that support you.
Right. I think the one minor challenge with this piece specifically is that it's actually on it's on Substack on that platform. And that's the one that like ranks really high. So it's one of these things where, I copied all this stuff onto Trapital.co. So that's there. But I know that there's this whole other thing with Google where two articles have the same name clearly prioritizes one. So yeah.
Which is why I don't like Medium. And we've talked about that, just owning your own content. Well, this is a little technical, but I had to deal with this when I moved. When you change domains, this stuff gets pretty hairy. But there's something called a 301 redirect, which basically if Substack, which is where your old content's hosted, if they allow it, it's like a forwarding address. So you could, if they give you permission, they could say, when someone comes to that piece on Substack, forward it to this new piece or the same piece on trapital.co. And then Google knows to basically give the equity to the new piece, not the old piece. So again, they might not want that because you're taking away the equity from their site, which is why Medium holds so much power. Right. They hold everyone's equity, link equity. But Medium actually does let you do redirects. And so maybe Trapital, Substack would as well.
Okay. And that would obviously have to be on an individual piece perspective to make sense, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. We'll look into that.
The other thing, I know, Jenni, maybe it makes a little sense to talk about tools. So the main free tools are like Google Analytics and Google Search Console. Like, highly recommend you set those up right away just to start tracking what works. On WordPress, there's the Yoast plugin. That's incredible, because another thing that's important is, let's say someone searches Jay-Z and Damon Dash, the little text, it's almost like a headline, right? It's like people, that's where SEO on page gets so time consuming, because you're writing that little piece and it's got to be catchy and it's got to have the keyword and all that. So, but Yoast helps you do that. Yoast also will do a quick on-page scan of your content and say, like, you need more headers. It will say like your keyword density, things like that. Highly, highly, highly recommend Yoast. Just at the minimum, it's like, it will give you the basics.
Right.
And then there's like keyword tools. So the ideal keyword tools will give you the volume of a search. And then they'll give you the ranking of the sites that have it. And so the like cream of the crop is a tool called Ahrefs, ahrefs.com. It's incredible. I've trialed it. My friends have helped me use it. It's really, really expensive. It's I think it's $180 a month. So like the math of it just doesn't work for me. There, you can hack it together. So the way I hack it together is, there's a competitor to Ahrefs called Moz, M-O-Z, and they have something called the Moz bar, which basically is a Chrome extension, and it gives you the ranking for every site. And so it tells you your site. I actually corroborated a few sites between Moz and Ahrefs, and they're pretty accurate on the ranking. And so I use Moz to get the ranking of a search. And then there's a tool called Keywords Everywhere, which was in one of Jenni's pages, which is also a Chrome extension that gives you the volume. So you can kind of piece it together, right? You get the ranks, the volume, and then Yoast gives you the on-page optimization, and you can kind of like combine those three things together.
Yeah. It's actually talking about the topic of kind of deciding on the keywords to go after, like for the 25% of the pieces that you are optimizing for SEO. Like, how do you decide that it is not like it's something you can actually compete in? Because especially for a beginner blogger like myself. It's like, there's no way I can, like most of these things, there's no way I can compete.
So you basically look for the lowest volume. You start with low volume keywords, and I'm still in I used to look at like a couple thousand, because anything that's like 5,000 plus is just always going to be competitive. So I tend to look between like 500, like ideally 1,000 to like 500 to 5,000, basically. And then, so let's say the term is, rent, should you rent or buy? And then I'll type that in, and then I'll just look at the results, and you'd be surprised. Usually around like 9 or 10, there's a site that's like a 10 or a ranking of a 10 or a 15. And then then that will be the green light for it. Or it could be a new term like atomic habits. No one was searching that until the book came out. Notion app, no one's searching that until the app came out. So it's not like you're competing against, personal finance, which has been searched since like 1999. So that's kind of, that's what I would do. And then again, they're called long tail keywords, where you combine like 4 words into one, which is, of course, the volume will go down, but that's kind of where I would start. The other place that I would start is, things like other people, like if you feature someone else. So a lot of my biggest SEO pages were from my podcast. It's because people are searching for the name of the guest. And, they're not high profile enough to have their own presence, but they're still high profile enough that people would search for them. So that will get them to my site. But again, am I converting that reader the right way? And then the other thing is you could just do little things to start slowly boosting your domain, right? Where, if you link from LinkedIn, if you make sure you put your link in on your LinkedIn page, your YouTube page, like every public page, your college alumni page, as long as it's public and the site has a high domain ranking. Again, Google's smart enough to know these things, but you've got to believe that it matters somehow, right? I created a Tumblr page to link to, just to put radreads.co in the bio. I created a Pinterest page to put radreads.co in the bio, because those are very high ranking sites. Again, I wouldn't spend too much time doing that, because I think Google is smart enough to know that a Tumblr page that no one goes to doesn't have high value just because it's Tumblr,
Right. So it is 10. I do have a hard stop.
Awesome.
To head out, but this was great. Thank you both.
Awesome.
We learned a lot. Got some tips.
Thank you. Yeah. Good luck with everything, and we'll keep riffing on this. By the way, the Slack channel it's starting to get some traction. So I know Dan was in the first iteration, which was a discourse group, which was just lacking on engagement. But the Slack one has about 100 subscribers to it.
All right, cool.
Probably 15 to 17 kind of active daily users. So I'll send you the link.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll jump in there. All right.
I feel like
take care, guys.
Nice to meet you, Dan.
You too.
Yeah, I feel like I've actually met a few pretty cool people through the Slack group. So thanks for setting that up.
Awesome.
Because your reader group is pretty cool.
Awesome.
Hey, let me just ask you one kind of one step back question, right? So again, for beginners like me, which I imagine there's probably a fair amount of your readers who are kind of just beginning their own content journeys, what actually would you spend your time on? It doesn't have to be SEO, right? Where should I spend, if you have 10 to 15 hours a week?
I would say, I think an email and newsletter is low-hanging fruit, because it's not subject to the algos. So you're always, you own that relationship. If you can just find something to add value, right? I think you've worked for 15 years in, interesting roles, and you're becoming an entrepreneur, things, you have things that add value, things that add value, you've lived things that add value. So I would say that again, this is my experience, having an email newsletter, and you can see it, right? Like 225 weeks later, like it's part of people's habits, right? I mean, it took 225 weeks to get there, but, and I think too, it forced me to be sharp, right? Like I'm constantly, I constantly need to, it's like exercise, right? I just constantly need to put myself out there, and I get a little bit better. So that's what I say, an email newsletter, but mostly because you can own that relationship with your end reader. The second thing I would say is honestly just writing regularly or publishing regularly. And that could be a podcast, that could be writing, that could be just pick one. Even tweeting, or doing Reddit daily, just doing something with consistency, because you really start to get the real kind of intuition behind the craft. And for me, writing specifically, but again, it doesn't have to be writing. It really like crystallizes my idea. It shapes my ideas.
Yeah.
So things that are really blurry, that are kind of swishing, like sloshing around my head. And I know it's not sexy, because like the first 75 things that I read probably got read by 25 people each. Right. But it was part of that kind of birthing process to get me to the later phase where now I can write something that can get 1,000 people to read. And so I would say writing, and people always say, like, have a presence on one social media channel. A lot of people are going to pick Instagram. For me, if I have to say like, what's my social media channel, it's Twitter. And so I'm kind of like committed to trying to post there a couple times, but again, really, really secondary. But honestly, if I were, one thing I wish, I think it's great to be thinking about this SEO stuff, because I think you can do small stuff at the margins, and SEO is like compound interest, like it builds with time. And so if you're doing, there are lots of things I wish I had done when I was at your phase, like just knowing about keyword research, or knowing to be more aggressive to get people to link to my site, right? Like I went on all these podcasts, but sometimes they didn't even link to my site. Now I email the person. I'm like, hey, can you please link to my site? Yeah. Like I can't do that 4 years later for some old podcast. So that's helpful to know all these things. And I think it's like, I like, my approach is like, do the deep dive, try to extract the key lessons that you can implement without going crazy. And that's the important caveat, because you can drive yourself crazy on all these things. Like you can go down a bazillion. I mean, it's the fucking internet. And so that's kind of what I would say is like, so do the deep dives. Another one that I'm just starting to do is Facebook ads. I wish I had done a deep dive on that earlier, because it's blowing like the same way some of the SEO stuff might be blowing your mind. Like, what the hell? Like this happens, like the same thing with Facebook ads. And again, it doesn't mean I'm going to start using Facebook ads, but I wish I knew enough that I could have sold more classes through Facebook ads if I had, and I probably will do it now, if I had even known how they work. Right. So kind of do the deep dive, pull out the key lessons, know in the periphery. But honestly, like, I think the key to any of this is just regular putting your ideas out into the world on a regular basis is more important than anything else.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And like you mentioned, kind of maybe picking one or two places. You mentioned like obviously your own blog, and then publishing to your newsletter. And then you kind of mentioned Reddit. Like, I think it might be a good idea to choose also a community that exists, right? Because you don't really have your own community when you're starting.
Totally.
Like, what would you kind of choose? Was Reddit a good one? Like, where do you think? Where you would go where there's an existing community to get feedback.
Reddit could be. I don't know enough. I don't know enough. I have heard that there's a lot of really, really active Facebook groups. Yeah. But again, I don't know. I would say that I personally kind of use Twitter as a community, in the sense that, it's not the kind of big broadcasts. It's like these little small conversations around, And so I think Twitter is fantastic. It's little, like, it takes a lot of energy. But I think Twitter, you can quickly drop in, you can search under personal finance and you can kind of see what people are saying. And then you can do exactly what you would do if you went to a conference on personal finance. You kind of like a post because, you just it's like making eye contact with someone. And then, you see like a side conversation happening and you just kind of quietly volunteer one little tidbit to add value to it. And then quickly those people will follow you. And, I share this in the Facebook, in the Slack group, but Tiago Forte, the productivity guy, I mean, his metrics are mind blowing. He has a 3,000 person newsletter and 9,000 Twitter followers. So very manageable by all of our standards, very achievable. But he has tweets with 250 likes, which means that people are consuming what he has to say. And I don't know if you saw the share, but of all, I think in 1 year on his course, he generated $500,000 of revenue.
Wow.
Off of a 3,000 person email. Yeah. So it really goes to show that those metrics, and he does no SEO. Yeah. He just writes. And he's weird. He breaks all the rules of writing, which is he has really bad headlines.
Yeah.
And his pieces are too long and they don't have subheaders in them. And he doesn't segment it. He doesn't do any of the things that, you're supposed to do. And yet again, he's got this core group and there's one thing he's really passionate about and good at. And it just, he doubles down, triples down, quadruples down on that.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, no, I think you're right? I think I was just trying to kind of pull out, okay, help me understand the lay of the land of SEO and what's most important. And now I feel like it's time to move on. I got to focus on the other stuff because you can get lost in that, especially when you're starting out, right? Like you said, and even for you who've been doing it for a long time, you could spend so many hours just trying to optimize and who knows what it'll get you.
I also, the thing that I doing the online courses forced me to think about is what's my funnel?
Yeah.
Right? And what am I moving people through, right? You find me and then what do I offer you next to gauge a higher level of interest? And then once you've opted into that, what's the next thing? And then, ultimately, none of us are doing this just out of the goodness of our hearts. Ultimately there's something that you want to sell, right? And my coaching practice has definitely been helped by the brand awareness around Rad Reads. But if I did zero SEO, if I did zero, most of it is still people email me, they look me up on LinkedIn and they email me, but it was because they read the newsletter, right? But they're not clicking through my funnel to buy the thing. They're just oh, smart guy, kind of thought leader. Yeah. Let me go find him. And I only need 10 of those and I've got a good business.
Yeah.
And I think I wish I would have saved myself a lot of anguish if I had kind of thought about that earlier than 4 years into it. And I would really push. In fact, I probably should write about this because I've had this conversation with a lot of people and they're I actually don't know what I'm selling. And they're doing all this growth hacking stuff.
Right. To what end?
To what end? Yeah. Which is kind of the Rad Reads thing. It's why do you do all these? What's the why behind why you make money and why you have this fancy job title and all that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Too. No, but I think you're asking the right questions. And I just watching how your brain works from, afar or through digital channels, you have the rigor and none of this is hard. I assume the stuff you do at work is way harder than this. There's just so much of it. And it's just kind of
there is. It's what's actually important, exactly. Right? And what should I spend my time on? And it's interesting. I just actually started, I haven't finished it, but I was listening to your recent interview with the capital allocators.
Oh yeah.
And I haven't heard that side of the full side of your story yet. So I'm only halfway through it, but I'm oh my God, this guy is my kindred spirit. I totally wireframed out a personal CRM system too. That was like one of my first ideas. I was like, why is there not an automated CRM system that I can use myself, right? Which still doesn't really exist, which is, I'm still trying to hack together something.
Totally.
But anyway, I appreciate all the time that you give to your followers. And, thanks for taking this.
I love it. Awesome. I got to run. Thank you so much. We got to keep doing these. Let's just do more talks. And if you do want to talk, I am excited about using ConvertKit. So whenever you get to the email phase of your journey, let me know.
Yeah, I will. Sounds good. All right.
Awesome.
Take care. Thanks,
Bye. Thanks. Bye. Have a good day.
Yeah.